kind of hypocrisy, this is not lost on the child. If you yourself do not show by your actions that you value Islam, and you value your attachment to Islam, and you value your practice of Islam, don't expect your child to get the message that Islam is that important and that great and the most important thing in his life. That's unreasonable on your part. You may tell the child in words, but if you see something else, so I said, children will pick up on this. And that example that you set, where you show that Islam and practicing Islam is not that important to you, or that disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not such a great thing in your eyes, that example that you said may sit and stay with your child for years to come. So as I said, this is a heavy responsibility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. We're supposed to be protecting ourselves and our children and our family from the hellfire. And by doing this kind of thing, we are setting obviously the wrong example. But it's not just parents. It's not just parents who have to be aware of the kind of influence and the effect they're having on others. Probably many of you also have younger brothers and sisters. And you can be certain that at one time or another, most likely, your younger siblings are looking up to you. Especially, for example, if your parents are much older or if they came from a different culture. They didn't have to deal with drugs and alcohol and sex and all of these things that they're facing here. Your younger brother and sister may be looking at you and seeing how you acted with respect to these things. How did you behave? How did you get through these things? Because the example of the parents, as I said in this case, is not relevant. But you are the one who is closest to them, and so therefore they'll be looking at you and seeing how you behave under such circumstances. So even if you're not a parent, you may be influencing someone, and particularly your younger brother or your younger sister. And in fact, friends, mutual friends, also are one of the greatest influences and the greatest examples and role models that people have. The Prophet ﷺ has told us, الرَّجُلُ عَلَى دِينِ خَلِيلٍ. The individual, the person is actually following the way of his closest friend. Because if you are close to someone, if you are friends with someone, you want that person to like you in return. So if you find that that person likes something, likes doing something, you also get involved in it, so that the two of you can be compatible. In fact, in many cases, if there's, for example, a conference in the mosque or a speaker coming to the mosque, many times people look to see how their friends are going to react. If they're going to go to the conference, if they're going to go to the speech, then they'll go. If they don't go, then also they're not going to go. Same way even with coming to the mosque. So again, here's another influence, another area that you have to be aware of. What kind of influence you are putting upon other people. Husbands and wives. You know, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that you see, for example, you'll see maybe a couple, a husband and wife, who are both active, who are both Islamically oriented, both fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you see a husband and wife who are both mediocre, both not very active, maybe not that careful about sins. Many times this is because of the influence that one has over the other. And that's why after marriage, many times you find one of the spouses changing, becoming much more like the other one, because either, as they say here, for better or for worse, but here I'm using it in a different way. Sometimes they get better because of the marriage. Sometimes the one who is in a better position comes down and becomes worse, like under the influence of their spouse. And you have to be aware of that, and you have to be very careful about that. As I said, in reality, and I don't have time to go through a lot of examples here, but in reality you have to realize that you are most likely an example or role model for someone. With respect to non-Muslims, you may be their only exposure to Islam other than what they see in the media. And they may judge Islam because of you and what they see in you. Even new Muslims, when someone converts to Islam, is looking at the people in the mosque, those people who are Muslims, as his role example. If those people aren't practicing Islam and they show that Islam, all of this that he read about, doesn't mean anything, I can assure you that will be the kind of Islam that he may follow. But if he's fortunate, alhamdulillah, to be among brothers and sisters who take the deen seriously, then he'll understand that this deen is to be taken seriously. So the new Muslim is looking up to you as an example. Again, as I said, whether you like it or not, this is the reality. People in positions of authority, teachers, imams, leaders of mosques, presidents of mosques, I can assure you people are looking at them to see how they behave. And sometimes they will use them as an excuse for their own behavior. If the president of the mosque doesn't come to the mosque, doesn't seem to care about the mosque, why should I come to the mosque? I'm not saying that argument is valid or makes any sense, but this is the reality. And so virtually, no matter who you are, no matter what circumstances you're in, there is a good chance, a very good chance, that someone is taking you as a role model and as an example. So therefore now the question becomes, what kind of role model, what kind of example are you setting for those around you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَزِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. That no bearer of burdens will bear the burden of another. In other words, we are not responsible for other people's sins or mistakes. And so you might be thinking that, yes, you might be setting a bad example, but in reality, if other people follow it and make the same mistake, that is not on your shoulders. But in reality, you may be dead wrong. Because the example you are setting is part of your deeds. This is part of your deeds, the example that you're setting. And you will be held responsible for the deeds that you commit and the ramifications of those deeds. The Prophet ﷺ told us that if anyone kills somebody else illegally, unjustly, then the son of Adam will also get a share of that sin. Someone murders somebody else, then the son of Adam, we're talking about the story of Cain and Abel, the two sons of Adam. That murderer, that son of Adam will also get part of that sin. Because, as the Prophet ﷺ explained, he was the first one who set this example. He's the first one who set this example of murder and killing, and so that everyone after him until the day of judgment who follows in that and follows in doing that action, then part of that sin, part of that responsibility will be on his shoulders. He cannot argue that I have nothing to do with what people did after me. The Prophet ﷺ has told us, he set the example, others followed his example, and because of his example, he will be held responsible. There's other evidence also that point to the same principle. And as I said, in reality, you're the example you're setting is part of your deeds, and you will be held responsible for your deeds. And now the last question is, how can we make sure? How can we make sure that we are setting a good example? Well, I can assure you that the key to setting a good example is not by deciding that whenever you're in public or whenever you're around people, you make sure that you act a certain way and you set that good example. That won't work. Because then if they find that in private actually you are not that way, then as I said, this kind of hypocrisy, this will show. This will be seen, and this will actually make matters much worse. The only real way that you can fulfill the obligation of being a good example is to improve yourself, to increase your iman, to increase your taqwa, to work on yourself, such that inshallah you are a good example for others, and those people who take your good example and follow your way, inshallah, if you had a positive influence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for every one of them who took your example and followed your way, in the same way that the son of Adam will be held responsible for every murder who came after him. This is a great opportunity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is a great way, to earn Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure if we remain conscious of it and work on ourselves and set the correct example for those people around us, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad.